The tip of the annihilation spear hums with a lethal, black light, aimed straight at the throat of a legendary king. Dragon King Boros, a creature that once leveled kingdoms, is now trembling, his massive frame hunched in a desperate plea as he begs Tori to put the weapon away. Tori's eyes are cold, devoid of the mercy he usually shows the villagers. He stares at the beast, his voice a low growl of pure suspicion as he demands to know why this bastard is still breathing. In a few minutes, this man will paint the deck of a holy ship with the blood of an entire Knight Order. But first, he has to decide if he's going to kill a dragon. Boros doesn't fight back. Instead, he lowers his head until it brushes the dirt, explaining that he has chosen loyalty over the endless torment of Hell's Gate. He offers his soul, kneeling to serve the very man who defeated him. Tori watches the dragon's every twitch, the gears in his head turning. He knows how these stories go. A monster like this doesn't just turn into a puppy. He's waiting for the moment Boros decides to stab him in the back, and the tension between them is thick enough to cut with a blade. Boros tries to use flattery, claiming he only follows the truly strong, but to Tori, the words taste like ash. It's annoying. It's loud. He's already reaching for his spellbook, ready to seal the dragon back into the void just to get some peace and quiet. But Boros is desperate. He clings to the edge of reality, begging for a single chance to prove he can actually be useful to his new master. The dragon makes a practical offer. He can secretly transport massive quantities of monster meat to the port town of Arcadia, solving their food crisis without raising suspicion. Tori considers the convenience. Having a legendary beast as a pack mule isn't the worst idea. He decides to keep the dragon on a short leash, thinking to himself that he'll utilize the creature's power until the exact moment it outlives its usefulness. Back in the town, the atmosphere is completely different. The townspeople gape in awe as Tori presents a giant monster carcass, providing enough food to last for weeks. He's become a pillar of the community, though they only know him by his alias, Seto Arima. When the local warriors ask for a guide through the treacherous Bone Eater Valley, Tori agrees, hiding his true power behind the mask of a humble adventurer. Ellie, the girl who has stayed by his side, steps forward with determination in her eyes. She doesn't want to just be protected anymore. She wants to test the magic Tori has been teaching her in a real battle. Tori looks at her, seeing the spark of growth, and agrees. They set their departure for 5 days out, unaware of the shadow looming over their peaceful routine. Deep in the valley, the air is damp and smells of decay. Ellie focuses, her hands steady as she unleashes a flame blast that incinerates a group of lesser monsters. She's getting better, more confident. But Tori isn't smiling. He's scanning the treeline, his instincts screaming that something is wrong. The monsters here are too strong, too organized. The natural order of the valley has been disturbed by an unseen force. The silence is shattered by a wet, crunching sound. A monster lunges from the shadows, its jaws snapping shut on a young warrior's shoulder. Ellie's scream of "watch out" comes a second too late. The group's formation shatters instantly. Blood sprays across the jagged rocks, and the screams of the wounded echo through the canyon as chaos takes hold. Tori sees more movement. Dozens of monsters are swarming from the east, drawn by the scent of blood. He realizes they're being surrounded. He barks out an order to retreat, his voice cutting through the panic like a whip. But Ellie isn't running. She's already on the ground, rushing to the side of the fallen warrior whose life is literally leaking through his fingers. Her hands are covered in red as she tries to channel healing magic. She's whispering, begging the light to work, but the man's eyes are already glazing over. He coughs, a thick spray of blood hitting Ellie's face, and then he goes limp. The light in his eyes dies, and Ellie freezes. The reality of death has finally hit her, leaving her soul fractured and exposed. Something inside Ellie snaps. The grief is too much, turning into a white-hot rage that burns away her fear. She ignores the retreat order and grabs a discarded sword, charging headlong into the approaching pack. Tori's heart skips a beat. He reaches out, shouting her name, "Alicia, what are you?" But she's already a blur of steel and fury. It isn't a fight, it's a slaughter. Ellie moves with a desperate, violent grace that Tori didn't know she possessed. Her sword strikes are heavy, fueled by a broken heart. She cuts through bone and hide, her clothes becoming soaked in monster blood. She's a whirlwind of destruction, leaving nothing but severed limbs and silence in her wake. When the last monster falls, the valley goes deathly quiet. Ellie stands in the center of the carnage, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She looks down at the bloody blade in her hand, the adrenaline fading to reveal the hollow ache underneath. She lets the sword clatter to the stones and collapses to her knees, her strength finally failing her. Tori walks toward her, his footsteps soft on the blood-soaked earth. He doesn't scold her. He doesn't offer platitudes. He simply opens his arms as she breaks down, her body racking with sobs. She clings to his chest, burying her face in his clothes, trying to hide from the world she just realized was so cruel. As he holds her, Tori realizes with a pang of guilt that the girl in his arms is no longer the bright, hopeful heroine he once knew from the story. The world has chewed her up and spit her out. The hardships, the loss, and the violence have carved away her innocence, leaving behind someone much more fragile and much more dangerous. Between her sobs, Ellie confesses the truth that's been eating at her. She feels useless. She thinks of herself as a failure because she couldn't save that man. The weight of her own perceived weakness is crushing her. She tells Tori that she can't face the Night Order anymore. She's terrified that she isn't the person they expect her to be. She looks up at him, her eyes red and swollen, asking him what she's supposed to do now that her world has fallen apart. Tori looks back at her, and in that moment, his resolve hardens. He won't just be an observer anymore. He resolves to become the kind of person, the kind of power, that can actually protect the people who have nowhere else to go. A month passes, and the wounds of that day begin to scab over. Tori has fully integrated into Arcadia. He's no longer just a guest, he's a mentor. He spends his days teaching the men how to hunt efficiently and the women how to preserve food using magic-enhanced techniques. He's building something real here, a sanctuary for those the rest of the world ignored. He takes a special interest in the orphans, Ars, Jessica, and Rue. He trains them in basic magic, watching as their small faces light up when they produce their first sparks. He notices how the town is coming alive, and more importantly, how Alicia is starting to smile again, forming real bonds with the people around her. One afternoon, Alicia's new friends start teasing her. They point out how she's always by Tori's side, calling it a fairy tale situation. They joke that she's like a princess being guarded by a handsome, mysterious knight while she waits for her true lover to appear. It's lighthearted, the kind of gossip that only exists in a peaceful town. The teasing gets more pointed, with a friend suggesting that Tori might actually have feelings for her. Alicia's face turns bright red, and she starts waving her hands around, clumsily trying to deny everything. She stammers that he's just her teacher, though even she has to admit, with a shy look away, that he is pretty cool. Later that night, the laughter fades into a comfortable silence. Alicia admits to herself that she didn't actually hate the teasing. It felt good to be seen that way. She sits under the vast, starlit sky with Tori, the peacefulness of the night making the horrors of the valley feel like a distant dream. She asks him the question that's been on her mind. Why? Why does he do so much for this town? Tori gazes into the distance, his voice quiet as he explains his philosophy. He believes that no matter how far someone has fallen, they can change. He believes in the path of atonement, and that by helping others, he might finally find peace for himself. He vows to walk that path forever, determined never to be the cause of someone else's pain again. He's trying so hard to be a good man. Alicia listens, her heart swelling with something she can't quite name. She hesitates, then starts to ask a hypothetical question, her voice trembling slightly. She looks at the ground, her fingers tracing patterns in the dirt, and asks if it would be okay if she said she wanted to walk that path with him. She isn't asking for a lesson or a mission, she's asking for a life. She's offering him her future, hoping he'll take it. Tori's heart tightens, but he forces himself to look away. He gently rejects her, telling her that he is fine being alone and that she has her own life and friends waiting for her. He doesn't think he's worthy of her company. Alicia's face falls. She awkwardly retracts her words, apologizing for making things weird, and quickly makes her exit. After she leaves, Tori sits alone in the dark. Her words echo in his mind. Did she really mean it? Did she actually want to spend her life with a man who has so much blood on his soul? He shakes his head, dismissing the thought as a misunderstanding. He tells himself it's better this way, but the silence of the night feels a lot heavier than it did before. Another month rolls by, and the bond between them only grows stronger despite the rejection. They spend their mornings in intense sword sparring sessions. The sound of wood clashing against wood rings out through the morning mist as they push each other to the limit, their movements becoming a synchronized dance of steel and sweat. Alicia eventually drops her practice sword, panting heavily, frustrated that she still can't land a single hit on him. Tori hides his pride behind a neutral expression, but internally, he's stunned. Her growth is incredible. Her talent for swordsmanship is far beyond anything he expected, and he knows she's becoming a force to be reckoned with. They sit down to a massive breakfast, the table overflowing with food. Tori looks at the children and promises to start teaching them more advanced magic. However, he gives them a stern warning. Magic is a tool for protection, not destruction. He tells them if they ever use it to cause a disaster, he'll be the one to stop them. Tori reflects on his routine. Morning training, afternoon hunting, evening teaching. It's simple. It's quiet. For the first time in 2 lives, he feels like he's actually found the tranquility he was searching for. He thinks he's finally escaped the narrative of the villain. But in this world, peace is often just the calm before a very bloody storm. The storm breaks during a routine hunt. Tori is feeling optimistic, thinking about how his reputation might finally be redeemed. But then, a companion points toward the horizon. Tori's blood runs cold. A thick, black pillar of smoke is rising from the direction of Arcadia. It isn't a cooking fire. It's the smell of a town being erased. The story shifts back a few hours. At the Arcadia port, Alicia watches as a massive ship bearing the crest of the heroic Night Order docks. Her heart lifts at the sight of her former comrades, but then she sees the white robes of the Spirit Church accompanying them. An uneasy feeling settles in her gut, a premonition of dread that only deepens when a familiar voice calls her name. Elliot, a man she once trusted, steps off the ship and greets her with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Alicia tries to be polite, telling him how much she's grown to love her life here in Arcadia. She mentions the person who helped her, Tori, and how grateful she is to have found this community. She thinks she's sharing good news. Elliot claims he's there on behalf of Reinhard to check on her, but the facade quickly cracks. A townsperson, desperate and angry, pushes through the crowd. He demands to know why the knights neglected them for so long, why they were left to starve while the church hoarded resources. He's just a man looking for answers, but he's talking to the wrong person. Without a word of warning, Elliot draws his blade and kills the man where he stands. He calls the villager trash as the body hits the dirt. Alicia gasps, her eyes wide with horror, but Elliot just looks at her with a chilling calmness. He tells her that she's finally leaving this filthy place, as if the murder he just committed was nothing more than stepping on a bug. Then, the nightmare begins. Elliot gives the order, and the heroic knights begin what they call a righteous purge. They don't differentiate between soldier and civilian. They slaughter anyone who resists, their holy armor soon splattered with the blood of the innocent. The peaceful days of Arcadia end in a chorus of screams and the crackle of burning homes. This is the turning point where the story leaves the light and dives into the abyss. The manga has caught up to the most brutal chapters of the novel, and the stakes have never been higher. If you thought this was a slice-of-life story about a reformed villain, the next few minutes are going to be a very rude awakening. Tori reaches the gates of Arcadia, but the town he loved is gone. In its place is a charnel house. The streets are choked with the bodies of people he knew by name. The smell of charred flesh and iron fills his lungs. He stands frozen, his mind struggling to process the level of cruelty required to turn a home into a graveyard in a single afternoon. He hears a weak sob and finds the children huddled in the ruins. They are surrounding Rue, who is pale and covered in blood. Ars and Jessica look up at Tori with tear-streaked faces, their voices cracking as they plead with him to use his magic to fix their friend. They still believe he can do anything. They still believe in miracles. Tori kneels, his hands shaking as he reaches for his medicine. But as he looks at Rue, he realizes the boy is already gone. The light has left his eyes. Even the most powerful panacea can't bring back a soul that has already departed. Tori has all the power in the world, and yet he is utterly helpless. He can only watch as the survivors break down in fresh waves of agony. He counts the survivors. Only 30 people left out of hundreds. And Alicia is nowhere to be found. The pieces of the puzzle start to click together in his mind. The Spirit Church and the heroic knights aren't just allies. They are co-conspirators in this massacre. They didn't come to save anyone. They came to cleanse the world of impurity. And Arcadia was their first target. The betrayal goes even deeper. It turns out Elliot had been feeding Reinhard lies for months, convincing the leader of the Knights that Arcadia's downfall was due to internal strife and poverty, not external threats. He used the suffering of the people as a cover for his own. She has to listen to the sound of Elliot and his men celebrating their victory. They drink and laugh, dismissing the lives they snuffed out as mere obstacles to their glory. Alicia stares at the floor, her soul bruised by the realization that the people she once admired are nothing but butchers. Elliot approaches her, his breath stinking of wine. He starts taunting her about her demonic blood, mocking the very thing she tried so hard to hide. Alicia's eyes flash with a remnant of her old fire, and she lunges forward, head-butting him with everything she has. The blow cracks his lip, and for a second, his smug expression shatters into a mask of pure rage. He backhands her, the force of the blow throwing her against the wooden hull. He grabs her by the collar, his fingers digging into her skin. He tells her that she's nothing now. Her protector is gone, and her village is ash. He leans in close, his voice a disgusting whisper as he declares his intent to break her spirit and make her his woman. He continues to leer at her, his hands wandering as he mocks her helplessness. Alicia can't fight back in her chains, and for the first time, she truly despairs. She cries out Lobelia's name, a desperate prayer for salvation. And then, as if the universe heard her, a massive, bone-shaking thud echoes through the entire ship. The party stops. The floor vibrates with the weight of an arrival. Elliot's brow furrows. He leaves Alicia and throws open the door to the deck, ready to scold whatever idiot dropped a crate. He walks past a priest who is desperately praying for mercy, and without a second thought, he executes him. He's done with mercy. He's done with being the better man. He vows to make every single one of them suffer for what they did to Arcadia. He turns his back on the carnage and begins his search for the one person who still matters. He kicks open the door to the cabin and finds Alicia. The relief in her eyes is enough to break a normal man, but Lobelia's gaze immediately fixes on the dark bruise blooming on her cheek. He sees the marks of Elliot's hands on her neck, and the temperature in the room seems to drop 20 degrees. He looks down at his own hands, which are dripping with the blood of the men he just killed. He hesitates. Does she see him as a savior, or is she terrified of him? He looks like the villain the world says he is. He's covered in gore, his eyes glowing with a dark light, and he wonders if he's just another monster in her eyes. But Alicia doesn't shrink away. She weeps with pure, unadulterated relief, her voice a broken whisper as she thanks him for coming. Lobelia's heart twists. He internally berates her for her foolishness. How could she believe in someone as broken as him? But he moves to her anyway, his movements surprisingly gentle as he begins to undo her chains. He produces a small vial and gives her a potion that will induce a deep sleep. He tells her it's for her own good. He doesn't want her to see the devastation outside. He wants to shield her from the final, most violent acts of his revenge. He wants her to wake up in a world where her enemies are already gone. Just as Alicia drifts off, a subordinate rushes in with frantic news. Ours is missing. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocks the ship, the force of it nearly throwing Lobelia off his feet. He realizes with a surge of panic that he made a mistake. He was so focused on Alicia that he left his young disciple vulnerable. The ship is tilting, water rushing into the lower decks. Lobelia orders his comrades to get Alicia to safety and evacuate the sinking vessel immediately. He won't leave the boy behind. He plunges back into the smoke and fire alone, his cape billowing behind him like the wings of a vengeful crow. He finds Elliot in the belly of the ship. The hero has managed to get back on his feet, and he's holding the bound and terrified Ars at sword point. He's using a child as a human shield, a final, desperate gamble to save his own pathetic skin. He looks at Lobelia with a crazed, wide-eyed stare, realizing this is his only leverage left. As the tension reaches a boiling point, We take a brief moment to acknowledge the shift in the story's translation, a meta-nod to the fans who have followed this dark journey from the beginning. The stakes are set, the pieces are in place, and the final confrontation between the villain, who found a heart, and the hero, who never had one, is about to begin. Elliot's hand is shaking, but the blade stays pressed against Ars's throat. He screams at Lobelia, demanding that he drop his weapons and kill himself right now, or the boy dies. It's the ultimate test of Lobelia's new humanity. Will he sacrifice himself for a child he barely knows? Or will he let the boy perish to ensure his revenge? Ars is remarkably brave for his age. He looks at his master and tells him to forget about him, to just kill Elliot and avenge the village. But the boy's words only make Elliot more furious. He bellows at the kid to shut up, pressing the steel harder against his neck until a thin line of red appears. He's losing his mind, driven to the edge by fear. Lobelia doesn't hesitate. He activates his divine armament, a high-level magic that allows him to instantly switch positions with an object or person. In a flash of black light, Lobelia is standing where Ars was, and the boy is falling safely into the shadows behind him. Elliot's eyes widen as he realizes he's now holding a blade against the most dangerous man alive. Lobelia quickly pushes a panacea into Ars's hand, telling him to drink it to counter the effects of the black magic used on him. Elliot recovers from his shock and starts mocking him, sneering about why a legend like Lobelia would care so much about a human brat who was stupid enough to make friends with demons. Elliot starts rambling about his own past, about the trauma of seeing his loved ones tortured by demons. He tries to justify his cruelty as a necessary evil, expressing a deep, visceral hatred for naive brats like Ars who don't understand how the world really works. He's trying to make himself the victim, even now. He doesn't wait for a reply. He unleashes a massive sword wave, a crescent of golden energy that slices through the ship's supports. Lobelia is forced to dodge, leaping back, while keeping himself between the attack and the injured Ars. The deck is disintegrating around them, the sea churning below the broken floorboards. Elliot is baffled. He asks Lobelia why the notorious magician is fighting for someone else. Why is he risking his life for a village of nobodies? Lobelia doesn't give him the satisfaction of an explanation. He just calls him a rotten bastard and lunges, their swords clashing with a sound like a thunderclap. As they trade blows, Lobelia has a moment of dark clarity. He realizes that he and Elliot are two sides of the same coin, both driven by revenge, both willing to burn the world down. But there's one key difference. Lobelia is fighting because someone hurt his precious comrades. He's not fighting for an ideal. He's fighting for people. He begins to analyze Elliot's movements, realizing the man has a position-swapping ability of his own. To counter it, Lobelia starts channeling a spell of terrifying proportions. He begins to manifest a fictional Hell's Gate, a void that will swallow everything in its path. He's going to make sure there's nowhere for Elliot to run. On a small rescue boat nearby, Alicia finally stirs. She looks around, her vision blurry, and asks Yuma where Tori is. When she hears he's still on the sinking enemy ship, she tries to stand up, her face pale with terror. She wants to go back for him, her heart refusing to accept that she might lose him now. Yuma has to physically hold her back. He explains that Tori's only priority was her safety. He tells her that if she goes back now, she'll only be a liability, and Tori's sacrifice will be for nothing. Alicia sinks back onto the bench, her hands trembling as she watches the flagship burn in the distance. The duel on the ship has become a desperate struggle for survival. Elliot is growing increasingly frustrated. No matter how hard he strikes, no matter what tricks he uses, Lobelia's expression never changes. That calm, confident look is driving Elliot to the point of madness. He can't understand why his opponent isn't afraid of death. Elliot, gasping for air, proposes that they end this with a single, final strike. He's betting everything on one move. Lobelia just stares at him, his silence speaking volumes. To him, Elliot isn't a rival or a hero. He's just a barking dog that's lived far too long. He prepares his own counter, his mana flaring like a black sun. The air between them begins to crackle and hum. Lobelia gathers every ounce of dark energy he has left, while Elliot readies his holy blade for a decisive clash. The world seems to slow down. The sound of the waves and the crackle of the fire fade away until there's nothing left but the two of them and the weight of their hatred. They scream their final attacks, Fall Abyss and Frostblade, and collide in the center of the deck. The explosion is blinding, a mixture of shadows and ice that engulfs the entire ship. The force of the impact sends a shockwave across the water, nearly capsizing the nearby rescue boats as the flagship is torn apart. When the smoke clears, Lobelia is standing. Elliot is on the floor, his leg nearly severed by a devastating slash. The hero is finally broken. He tries to crawl away, his fingers scratching at the blood-slicked wood, but he has nowhere to go. The power he was so proud of has failed him completely. The scream that leaves Elliot's throat is pathetic. My leggsss, he howls, the sound echoing across the water. He's no longer the arrogant knight. He's a terrified animal. He starts begging, crying for Lobelia not to torture him, offering anything and everything to save his life. It's a sickening display of cowardice. But the coward still has one trick left. In a flash, Elliot uses his swap ability. He vanishes, and in his place appears a confused, terrified nun from the spirit church. Lobelia freezes, his blade inches from her throat. He realizes Elliot had an accomplice waiting on a distant escape boat, providing him a way out at the cost of an innocent life. The nun, who was safely on a boat just a second ago, is now in the middle of a literal hell. She panics, her hands grabbing onto Lobelia's bloodstained cloak. She's sobbing, her voice high and shrill as she begs him to save her. She doesn't understand that she's just a pawn in a game she already lost. She tries to bribe him, promising the full cooperation of the spirit church and all its riches if he just lets her live. Lobelia looks down at her with eyes that have seen too much. He knows the church is just as guilty as Elliot. He doesn't say a word. He just swings his blade in a single, cold slash, ending her plea forever. Lobelia turns his attention to the unconscious Ars, making sure the boy is protected as the ship begins its final descent into the ocean. Meanwhile, Elliot has reached a small boat far from the wreckage. He's clutching his mangled leg, but he's laughing. He gloats about his survival, mocking Lobelia for not finishing him when he had the chance. Elliot grits his teeth against the pain, already plotting his return. He's going to bring the entire Night Order back to finish the job. But then, a voice speaks from the shadows of his small boat. No remorse at all, I see. The voice is deep, rumbling like an earthquake, and it makes the hair on the back of Elliot's neck stand up. A massive figure looms over him. He introduces himself as Dragon King, Boros. He tells Elliot that he is a subordinate of Lobelia, and that he's been waiting for this moment. He's furious that a piece of trash like Elliot dared to disrespect his master. The dragon's eyes glow with a sadistic, predatory light. Boros leans in, his breath hot against Elliot's face. He promises to peel the knight's skin piece by piece before he lets him die. Chained portals erupt from the air, dragging the small boat into a dark dimension. Elliot's screams of GYHHHH are the last thing heard before he is pulled into a torment that will never end. The flagship is finally swallowed by the Hell's Gate. As the vortex of dark energy consumes the wood and steel, Lobelia dives into the freezing sea. He wraps his arms around Ars, using his own body as a shield against the crushing pressure and the debris of the sinking wreckage. He fights the current, swimming toward the surface. He breaks the surface, gasping for air, with Ars still clutched to his chest. He looks around at the devastation he's caused, reflecting on how much his actions resemble the original Lobelia Crowley. But then he sees it, a rescue vessel in the distance, its lanterns bobbing on the waves. They're coming for him. Elisha's voice cuts through the night air, screaming his name. Roberia. The boat pulls alongside them, and hands reach down to pull the exhausted magician and the boy from the water. Elisha is there, her face wet with tears, her hands trembling as she helps them onto the deck. He's alive. They're both alive. As he lies on the deck, catching his breath, Lobelia catches a glimpse of Boros flying away in the distance, the dragon having finished his errand. Lobelia muses to himself that while he doesn't fully trust the beast yet, he was useful. He decides that maybe, just maybe, he'll stop being quite so cold to the dragon from now on. The sky begins to clear, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. Lobelia looks up at the blue expanse and thinks, it's finally over. But then he's nearly tackled by Alicia, who pulls him into a fierce, tearful embrace. She's sobbing into his shoulder, her voice a repetitive mantra of "I'm glad. I'm so glad." The rest of the survivors gather around, their faces filled with a relief so profound it makes Lobelia uncomfortable. He wonders how they can be this happy just because he survived. He tries to break the tension by asking Alicia why she revealed her real name to the others, but she's not interested in his deflections. Alicia looks him in the eye, her voice steady despite the tears. She confesses her deepest fear, that she couldn't imagine a life without him. She's done hiding her feelings. Lobelia tries to bring up Reinhard, tries to give her an out, but she's not listening. She's done with the heroes of the past. They spend the next few days in a grim routine, clearing rubble, tending to the wounded, and most painfully, gathering the bodies of the dead in the central square for a final farewell. At night, a somber funeral ceremony is held. The bodies of the fallen are placed on massive pyres. As the torches are lit, the survivors stand in a circle, their faces illuminated by the orange glow of the flames. The smell of smoke is different this time. It's the smell of honor and remembrance, not slaughter. Lobelia stands at the edge of the crowd, his heart heavy with regret for the lives he couldn't save while he was away. But as he looks at the faces of the survivors, he makes a vow. They will keep on living. They will rebuild. They will carry the memories of the dead into a future where they never have to fear the heroes again. 3 days later, the atmosphere has begun to shift toward the future. Lobelia is standing in the barren landscape outside the town when a familiar, horned figure comes sprinting toward him. It's Boros, and he's shouting "Roberia-sama," with an enthusiasm that seems completely out of place for a dragon king. Lobelia officially recognizes Boros as his subordinate, acknowledging his help in the battle. But as the dragon wags his tail, metaphorically, Lobelia can't help but compare him to an overexcited dog. It's a strange dynamic, the world-destroying dragon and the magician who just wants a nap. Boros, being a gossip at heart, starts teasing Lobelia about his relationship with Lady Alicia. Lobelia tries to deny it, but his face betrays him. He eventually admits that they've grown close, even mentioning, with a bit of a blush, that she has a habit of sneaking into his bed at night because she's still plagued by nightmares. Boros drops a bombshell. In this world, that kind of intimacy implies marriage. Lobelia's brain practically short-circuits. He's a man who has mastered the most complex spells in existence, but the concept of marriage leaves him completely flustered. He asks Boros what you're even supposed to do in a marriage, sounding like a confused teenager. A week later, the town of Arcadia is buzzing with energy. Alicia bursts into Lobelia's room, excitedly telling him to hurry to the town square for Yuma's big speech. She notes with a playful grin that he's overslept again, showing how much more comfortable and lively she's become in this new life. The square is packed. Yuma stands on a makeshift stage, his voice carrying over the crowd. He acknowledges the grief they all feel and the scars left by their enemies. But he insists that they won't be defined by their destruction. He declares that the history of Arcadia isn't ending. It's just starting a new chapter. He announces a celebration of rebirth for a true Arcadia, a place where humans and demons can live together without fear. The tension that has gripped the survivors for weeks finally snaps, replaced by music and dancing. A massive feast is laid out, and for the first time in a long time, there is genuine joy in the air. Alicia brings a plate of freshly prepared food to Lobelia, and they watch the celebration together. He looks at the people he's protected, at the girl who loves him, and at the peace they've managed to carve out of the chaos. He makes a silent promise to protect this warm, brilliant peace, no matter what it costs him. But life with a Dragon King is never purely serious. A bonus chapter reveals that Boros, when he isn't peeling the skin off knights, usually spends his time tucked away inside Lobelia's magical grimoire. He's the last of the Dragon clan, a creature of immense power who currently spends his days bored out of his mind. One night, Boros gets himself kicked out of the grimoire for cheating at a card game against the other spirits. He finds himself in the quiet house while Lobelia and Alicia are fast asleep. Not wanting to just sit around, he decides to sneak out and explore the town, thinking he can get away with it. He doesn't get very far. A young boy, Ars, catches him in the hallway. Ars isn't intimidated. He looks at the Horned Man and threatens to call for Master. Boros, the legendary Dragon King, absolutely panics. He can't let Lobelia find out he's wandering around, or he'll be turned back into a bookmark. He drags Ars into the lab, introducing himself as Ryuo, a friend of Lobelia's from another country. He makes up a story about how he just came to return a borrowed item and was planning to leave without waking anyone up. He's sweating bullets, trying to sound like a dignified guest while a child stares him down. Just as he thinks he's convinced Ars, Boros hears footsteps. He panics even more at the thought of being seen by Lady Alicia. But it's not her. It's little Jessica, who enters the room rubbing her eyes and clutching a teddy bear. Now Boros has 2 children to deal with, and his secret is falling apart. Ars introduces the mysterious friend to Jessica. Boros is trying to usher them back to bed when he hears a voice that actually terrifies him. Alicia is right outside the lab door, her voice calling out to see if the kids are in there. Boros realizes he has seconds before his master's wife catches him. Alicia opens the door and looks around. The lab is a mess of scrolls and equipment, but it seems empty. She sighs, thinking she must have just been half asleep and imagining voices. She closes the door and heads back to her room, leaving the empty lab in silence. The camera pans up to reveal Boros clinging to the ceiling like a lizard, holding both Ars and Jessica in his arms to keep them out of sight. Ars is absolutely thrilled, thinking this is the coolest game of hide-and-seek ever. Boros, meanwhile, is whispering furiously for them to be quiet before his heart gives out. He explains to the kids that he promised Lobelia he'd remain unseen and begs them to keep his presence a secret. He decides the only safe way out is the window. He's going to make a quick exit and fly back to the grimoire before anyone else wakes up. He thinks he's home free. As Boros takes flight, he feels a sudden weight. Ars and Jessica have impulsively grabbed onto his legs, wanting to join the adventure. The takeoff is a disaster. Boros is wobbling in the air, trying to maintain his balance while 2 children dangle from his ankles. It's a chaotic, unstable flight that ends in a very rough landing in the wilderness. They land in a rocky area far from town. Boros is fretting, worried about the danger he's put the children in, but Ars and Jessica are ecstatic. They've never been in the air before. Their eyes are wide with wonder, and for a moment, Boros forgets to be worried and enjoys the look of pure joy on their faces. Jessica looks at him with those big, pleading eyes that no one can say no to. She asks for more. Boros sighs, his soft spot for kids winning out over his fear of Lobelia. He decides to take them on a brief continent tour through the air, figuring he can get them back before the sun is fully up. He flies them over the vast, barren landscape. To Boros, the world is old and tired, but as he listens to the kids cheer, he realizes that to them, everything is bright and new. He feels a sense of responsibility he hasn't felt in centuries, acting as a protector for these little lives. He acts as their guide, pointing out the dangerous creatures of the desert. He shows them the bone coyotes, the giant sandworms, and the purple-furred hypno-jaguars that can put a traveler to sleep with a single look. He's teaching them survival skills while giving them the ride of their lives. Suddenly, Jessica tugs on his sleeve and says she needs to pick flowers. It takes the ancient dragon a moment to realize she's asking for a bathroom break. He lands behind a large rock, telling her to be quick while he and Ars wait. He's being a very responsible, if slightly confused, babysitter. While they wait, Ars looks up at Boros and thanks him for being so kind. Boros brushes it off with a gruff remark, saying the kids work hard in the village and deserve some fun once in a while. He's trying to maintain his tough dragon persona, but it's clear he's already been won over by the kids. They start talking about how Boros has to leave soon. But the conversation is cut short when Boros realizes it's been far too long since Jessica went behind that rock. A cold feeling of dread settles in his chest. He calls her name, but there's no answer. Only the sound of the wind whistling through the stones. Boros rushes behind the rock and finds it empty. There's no Jessica. Instead, he sees the distinct, padded paw prints of hypno-jaguars leading away into the deep desert. He realizes that while he was talking to Ars, the predators must have snuck up and carried her off without a sound. He tells Ars to stay put and not move a muscle. Boros takes to the sky, his eyes scanning the dunes with predatory focus. He quickly spots the pack. A group of hypno-jaguars is dragging Jessica's unconscious body toward their den. The sight of the little girl in danger causes something to snap inside him. The Dragon King descends like a falling star. He lands in front of the cats, his wings creating a massive dust storm. He stands between them and the princess of his master's house. He declares that she belongs to his master, and that if they even think about touching her again, he will erase them from existence. He doesn't use a physical attack. He gives them a terrifying smile and sentences them to death. He opens his mouth, and a massive beam of pure energy, the dragon tear, obliterates the entire pack in a single second. There is nothing left but a scorched path in the sand. He picks up Jessica, her small form safe in his large hands. He returns to Ars and the wooden structure near the town. He sets them down and reveals his true name, Dragon King Boros. He asks them to keep this a secret, telling them that some things are better left as a mystery. The children wave goodbye, their faces full of wonder as their new friend prepares to leave. Boros says his final farewells and flies off into the bright morning sky. He feels good. He feels like a hero. He heads back to the house, slipping through the window and returning to his human form. He's ready to crawl back into his grimoire and spend the rest of the day sleeping off his adventure. But when he enters Lobelia's lab, he sees a mess of papers and research materials scattered everywhere. Thinking he'll be a loyal subordinate and earn some extra points, he decides to clean up the mess. He snaps his fingers, using a high-level purification spell to clear the room in an instant. Lobelia walks into the room a few moments later, rubbing his eyes. Boros proudly presents the all-clean room, but Lobelia doesn't look happy. He looks horrified. He starts frantically searching for his research materials, his documents, and his years of work. He asks where everything went, his voice rising in pitch. Boros casually admits that since it looked like trash, he reduced all of it to ashes. The look on Lobelia's face is more terrifying than any dragon. There is a massive, comedic explosion as Lobelia unleashes his fury, and the story concludes with the great Dragon King Boros being turned to ash himself. Some villains never learn, and some heroes just want their paperwork back.